I'm Ethel Barnes. I was born Ethel Gavel way back in the back blocks of Australia, and went to secondary school in Sydney. And when I left school I was quite young, I was 16, and most of the courses that I was interested in, like veterinary medicine or medicine, something in that line, you had to be 18. But my mother rang me from the middle of New South Wales and said she'd just heard that physiotherapy, they'd lowered the age to 17. And as I was just turning 17, I saw that as an option because I was keen on the medical side of things and had a cousin who was a doctor. And so I applied for physiotherapy, and I'd had quite good grades at school, so I got straight in. And I had to board in Sydney, and we boarded in a hostel in Burwood. I can remember it vividly because nowadays most students try to get a room of their own, but I was boarding with three others. One was a doctor, a aspiring doctor, another physio, and another OT, so we're all in the same area of expertise. But it was quite fun in that hostel. We were all trying to work in the one room, study in one room. We had about 2 PowerPoints, and on those PowerPoints we had a double adapter on a double adapter on a double adapter, and we often fused things. And we had sewing machines and no TVs, of course, in those days, and radios and bed lamps and those sort of things, all onto this 2 PowerPoints. I remember once I got quite friendly with the other girl who was doing physio, but she was a year ahead of me, and she introduced me to cold sausages and marmalade for breakfast. Not that I enjoyed it, and I don't do that now, but I just thought it was a very strange thing. And apart from the work and the training, we did go out quite a lot. It was the era of balls and dances and that sort of thing, and so we had quite a high social life as well. So it's amazing we actually got through. But I enjoyed the training. I liked working with people. I liked helping people. But the first year was mainly at the Sydney University, and we did subjects such as most people did, I suppose: anatomy, histology, physiology, massage, kinesiology, elementary electricity, which was new to me because I didn't take chemistry or physics at school. Ultrasonic and obstetrics were the main things, and I well remember the anatomy and the dissecting, and we were very apprehensive about this dissecting. Was it going to be a whole body, or was it just going to be an arm and a leg? And it turned out to be just an arm and a leg, which was good, although we did view the whole bodies. And we used to go down to what we called the dungeon, and there was an old caretaker there. I think his name was Harry, I'm not too sure now. But he took great delight in trying to scare us for our first visit to the dissecting room. And we were like, most of us were girls. There were 2 boys in our intake. One was blind, and he was very nice. He'd come into physiotherapy quite old, and we identified with him. And the other one, I don't remember too much about him, but it wasn't really done for men to be in those sort of occupations. No male nurses at all, and these 2 male physiotherapists. And so, first of all, we were pretty apprehensive, and we were very gingerly touched the bodies, but in the end we just ate our lunch beside it and dissected a bit and then ate our lunch, and so we got quite used to it, and used to the smell of formalin, which was a bit of a shock to start with. I'd had nothing to do with dead humans at that stage, and it was a shock. But of course, after working in the hospital for 2 or 3 years, that's not unusual. Then for the second year, we did part-time at the university and part-time at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney, and I enjoyed the hospital work very much. I liked people I liked treating people who were sick, and we were allowed to do minor treatments, but most of it was under the supervision of another physiotherapist. Things that I noticed that have changed dramatically is the attitude of the senior staff in the hospital. The big brass were treated like God, and we used to go on rounds right up till the time I left working in a hospital, and we were the retinue, and we went along behind, and the consultants, all men, swept through, and everybody almost touched their forelock as they went past. And matron was no better. We were really scared of matron. And we wore starched white uniforms, white stockings, white shoes. I went down to visit a patient in Southland Hospital the other day, and the physio was working with him, and she had on a very practical tracksuit and just low-heeled shoes and no stockings that I could see. Nothing on the head. Well, we didn't wear anything on our head either, but the nurses all had caps, and the matrons and sisters had veils. So that's all gone by the board now. It's a bit hard to tell who's who in the hospital when you go to visit. And the third year was all in the hospital. We had exams at the end of each year, and I seemed to do quite well. Probably not the best student, but enough to get by. And the third year, was, as I said, was all in the hospital. And I remember one thing about the hospital: they had a really good cafeteria, and they made sandwiches that had about 10 fillings, and we always went to the cafeteria and had these great sandwiches. Another thing I remember about being a student at Prince Alfred was we used to go to the mental health unit, and it was very, very scary. We were shown the room where they had the jacket and the padded walls in this little room, and we were really shaking there. I don't know what they thought would happen, but we were let in with a lock and let out with a lock, and we went there to give them just general exercises like ball games and things like that. And that was my first introduction to anybody with any mental illness, and it was a bit of a shock. But now I work with disabled people, both mentally and physically disabled, and riding for the disabled, and I've just got an affinity with them. We had our final exams, and I don't remember how well I did, but I must have done quite well, because I was invited to go to the Royal North Shore Hospital. I hadn't had a great deal to do with Royal North Shore, but it was a very recognised teaching hospital, and I was invited to go to there as a resident, first-year resident, and it was a pilot scheme to see if it worked. I'm not sure if it's still going, that scheme, but it must have worked well, because I was invited back as the senior physio to go with a new junior, and I enjoyed that work very much. I enjoyed the hype of having to get up in an emergency in the middle of the night and work with the rest of the medical staff, and you had a sort of a status. Perhaps I was young and I enjoyed that feeling of status. I don't aspire to that anymore, but that's just a sign of age, I guess. And most of the things that we went for were urgent. Chest, obstetrics, tetanus was a big thing in those days. A lot of the diseases we worked with in those days have been eradicated, thank heavens. I worked in a the sanitarium, where all the patients, or most of the patients, had tuberculosis. And I was doing a ward round at that time with quite an important consultant, and this patient went into cardiac arrest. So he had a penknife on his keyring, and he just got it out and did an incision between the ribs, pulled them apart, and started hand massaging the heart. And that was, it was such a new thing. It was written up, and in some of the newspapers and the medical journals, and he did revive that patient, but I don't know how long they lasted. So it was a new thing for that time, which was probably around about 1957 or 58. And after that time in the hospital, I remember that when you're young and a female and unattached, we had to be quite wary of some of the orderlies and the ones, well, we didn't look down on them, but we aspired to marrying a doctor. We didn't aspire to marrying an orderly, so we just had to counter that. And I remember I did have a few fleeting romances, one with a guy who served me petrol at the petrol station, and another one was an orderly who was always waiting for me when I came home after a night out or something, and he was quite harmless, but it was just one of those things you look back on. We lived in the nurses' home, and the nurses were under a stricter curfew than us, so we were allowed to have a key, and the nurses, I think they were a little bit envious of us because we were treated a bit more casually than they were, and we didn't seem to have anybody responsible for us, except perhaps the head of the department, because there wasn't a head of department there as there was at Prince Alfred. And I enjoyed that time very much. In fact, I still miss the hospital work. Even though I've retired, I remember when I did start private practice that patients weren't as sick and there wasn't the emergency. So I went into ambulance work to sort of counter that, really, and I enjoyed the just the hype and the adrenaline rush, if you like, of being on call. And now the stretchers have got too heavy for me, or maybe the patients have, I don't know, but now I'm in victim support, and that is not quite as demanding, but all the same it's rewarding.